Wherever you at, wherever you at in this world, listen up. Yo, I spit this for my family, the people, the earth. And we've been at this a long time now, digging the dirt. I mean, like putting in work. Forget the friction. We were brought here right now for a reason. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 39 of In a Good Way podcast. Today's special guest is Natalie Sudman. Natalie is an author, an artist, a psychic intuitive, and she was also an archaeologist for many years, now retired. So thank you, Natalie, for being here and welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Omar.
My pleasure. I reached out to you maybe half a year ago, and since then it was, I'm very excited because it took so long to have you on here. So, but you were actually my very first NDE that I saw. I had no idea what NDEs were. And, I just got really excited because even certain things you shared really resonated with me. And there are things that you can't always talk with people about.
Mm-hmm.
And so, even after that, I went down the NDE rabbit hole.
It's easy to do. There are a lot of them out there.
Yeah. And I had no idea. Right. So, I even mentioned to you right before we started how I even felt bad about asking you to come on because I seen how many interviews you've done already. And I was like, wow, like you've been doing them for years. So before we get into the NDE, I always like to find out, as far as like when you were little, were you already having certain, like a connection to the other side and all that? Or how did it begin for you? At what age?
Yeah, when I was a little kid, I would have dreams of things that would later happen.
Oh, okay.
So, and I was also, I think I just assumed that everyone thought about things the way I did. Like I would sit in church and I would look at someone in front of me and think, scratch your ear, scratch your ear, scratch your ear. And they would scratch their ear eventually.
Wow.
Excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold.
Oh, no.
So I was playing around with things, even when I was a little kid. But it really, I think probably in my 30s, I started taking it a little more seriously and reading books about people's experiences or I think I read maybe one NDE. No, I don't know if I even read any NDE books, but I read like the Seth books, some of those, and if you're familiar with those.
I'm not actually.
They're channeled books from like the 70s maybe.
Oh, wow.
And I ran across Robert Monroe's books. He was a sound engineer back in the 50s, and he started having out-of-body experiences, and he didn't know what was happening to him. He thought he was dying or something. And he documented these experiences in great detail and eventually put them into some books. Oh, wow. So when I started reading stuff like that, I was like, oh, maybe I can do that. And I started taking these kinds of things more seriously, I guess, and starting to meditate and try to gain some control over psychic abilities, I guess. I don't think I was all that successful, but it was fun to try. It was, and I think it's important. I think that a lot of people have experiences and then just wait around for another one to happen. But I think, like anything, when you practice, you're going to get better at it. And you're going to start to learn some control and some uses for these things that are helpful for yourself or humanity. You can be of service. So I think it's valuable to put a little effort toward it.
Yeah, no, that resonated a lot. So what happened at the age of 30 that made you want to dig deeper? Is that when you had the NDE or not yet?
No,
Okay.
No, I don't really know what happened in particular. I don't know if there was one particular thing. I think my interest kind of went in and out throughout my life, but in my 30s, for some reason, it just I got more interested in it.
Okay.
And I was able to, I had a couple of out of body experiences, and I think that probably spurred things on a little bit.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
wow, this is real. You know, it's real in a whole different way when you start to have experiences that that blow up your ideas of what's possible. You know,
Mm,
they're so far beyond it.
100%. So in these out of body experiences, do you remember what they were about? Why it was so significant, or what happened during them?
Well, the first one was very conscious. I was trying to do it. And
Oh,
so I remember sitting up and kind of just peeling out of my body and going, oh, whoa. Oh, so that's what this feels like.
wow.
It wasn't just, you know, we can travel as a point of consciousness too,
Mm,
but this was actually felt like it was peeling out of my body.
wow.
And then I just hovered above my body for a few minutes
Wow.
and was kind of trying to figure out how to move or how to see or how to perceive. And I made a little bit of a movement and I ended up just spinning because it doesn't take very much movement to really move.
Oh, wow.
And I started spinning and it freaked me out. So I went right back into my body. And then probably a week or two later, I was just sitting in a chair in a really warm room. I was really comfortable. I was kind of half asleep. And I just started to roll out of my body and I got stuck. I couldn't get this shoulder out.
Oh, wow.
I was kind of pulling, and there was other beings with me there, and they were all laughing. They thought it was really funny. It
Wow.
kind of woke me up and I popped back into my body. So those are the two, you know, I didn't really go anywhere or have experiences other than just peeling out of my body, which was a really interesting feeling.
Most definitely. Yeah, because I had those, and then I was able to see. Unfortunately, they weren't the best circumstances. Um, but it's like, when I was in a relationship, I saw someone doing something, and
Mm.
when I called them for like 2 days, they didn't answer. Finally, they called me with an apology. I'm sorry. I was like, I know I saw you. So, but thankfully, that relationship opened me up a lot. And I was probably like, I don't know if I was 25 or 26. So that was like everything went fast forward. Like I learned so much during that time because, they would sometimes not tell me, but then eventually they would tell me the truth because I knew it. I would feel it. I dreamed it or
Mhm.
astral projected. So it was pretty interesting. So I wanted to ask you about well, I didn't want to jump right into the NDE because there's so many things I wanted to ask you. But I guess we could lead up to that, to the NDE. So up to the time you were 30, you started searching, and at that point, from that point to the NDE, how long was it?
Probably about 15 years, maybe.
Oh, wow. Okay, so in between, from your 30s to the NDE, as you were learning more, were you enhancing your gifts? Like,
Um, I guess, yeah, I guess so. I think that, um, yeah, I'll say yes to that. I at about maybe 40 or 42, I started doing readings for friends,
oh,
psychic
wow.
readings,
Okay.
and having a little bit more confidence in what I was seeing and
Mm,
the information that I was getting. I did a little bit of channeling and things like that. I didn't do any of that for strangers, and I didn't, make a business card or anything.
ah,
But I did try to practice more, try to actually take it seriously and gain a little confidence and practice enough to feel like I knew what I was doing. I didn't do it a lot. I never did a lot
mm,
until after my NDE.
okay. And so, Were you using tarot cards as well, or just you would just get the?
Yeah, I would use tarot cards.
Okay.
I like the tarot for a number of reasons. It's nice to have something physical
Mm,
to hold or to look at. It kind of bridges. It acts like a bridge between the intuitive and the physical. You know, you can close your eyes and really kind of go into that intuition. Um, but it's nice to remind ourselves that this physical world is also part of the non-physical. It's
mm,
not, it's not separate. It's all holy. It's all spiritual, you know. And
mm,
so when you have your eyes open and you're handling something physical, you can say, okay, this is really real.
mm.
This is real in a physical form way in the world. So I like,
Definitely. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, just saying, I like that part of it. Mhm.
Most definitely. Also, since you said that how it's all connected and it's not separate. When you mentioned the out of body experience, how you said there were beings there with you. Did you know the beings, or it's just they're always watching us like all the time? How is that?
Um, they were familiar to me.
Mm,
And, you know, when I got back in my body, it wasn't like, oh, I know who those people were. It was more like, oh, they're so familiar to me. I'm sure I know them, but I don't know them as this physical world personality. I don't
mm.
know.
Oh wow.
I think
Okay.
that as a whole self, I probably know them. They were
Mm.
very familiar. It wasn't like a bunch of strangers standing around laughing at me or anything. Although
Oh,
who knows? I don't know if I do that or not.
so they didn't really give you an understanding as to like if they're just part of the people watching like the Natalie show or anything like that. It was like just.
I didn't ask them, and I guess I didn't go back into that to figure that out. If I look
Oh,
at it now, it looks to me like they were some of my helpers or colleagues or guardians or whatever people want to call them.
mm,
Um, they were some of those guys, some of those
oh,
people.
oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's some stray random strangers that sometimes just watch us, but I think it's creepier to think about that from the human perspective
Yeah,
than it is from a whole self perspective.
yes. So while you wrote the book after the NDE, right? So I don't jump ahead. Okay. So I guess let's lead up to the NDE. So the NDE, then you were about 45, you said?
Yeah, I have to do the math, 47.
Oh, okay. And
Mhm.
at that point you had been an archaeologist for how many years?
I had done archaeology work since I was about 32, I think, or 31 or 32, somewhere around there. So I'd done it for about 16 years.
Oh wow.
And I was, I'd been doing it long enough that I was kind of in the administrative end of things now.
Mm,
And I didn't like that. I wanted to be outside, or I wanted to be doing, I don't know, doing the groundwork. So I also wanted to travel. So I was looking for an overseas job,
mm,
and I was having a lot of trouble finding anything. So um, what I did have an opportunity to do is go volunteer to go down to help with Hurricane Katrina cleanup,
okay.
and down in Mississippi and Louisiana. So I volunteered to do that a couple of times. And while I was there, I met some people from the Corps of Engineers, US Army Corps of Engineers
Mm.
and Bureau of Reclamation. And a few months later, one of those women called me up and said, "Hey, we have jobs in Iraq. If you want to go, do you want to go to Iraq?" I was like, okay. So that's how I ended up in Iraq. I was just looking for an overseas job, and that's one that fell in my lap. So I
Wow.
went ahead and took it.
So had you had any other overseas jobs, or that was your first one?
That was my first one,
Mm.
I think. I'm trying to remember. No, I had worked in Antarctica
Oh wow.
back in 1999, 2000. I had gotten a job down there and spent about 4 or 5 months working.
I'm sure there's a lot of I don't like calling them conspiracy theory people, but a lot of people have all these ideas about Antarctica, and while you were there, you didn't see anything out of the normal, even with you having psychic gifts or anything.
No.
No. So I'm curious now about Antarctica. Like, how is it over there? It's just cold, nothing but snow, or
It's beautiful. It
Mm,
was beautiful. You don't think of it that way. Yeah, I do think, "Oh, it's just snow, it's just white."
mm.
But it was beautiful. It was snowy, but it was no worse than a Minnesota winter. I grew up in
Oh,
Minnesota,
okay.
and, it was summer when I was there. Their summer, our winter.
Oh, wow.
And, the town is very I was at McMurdo Station, which is the biggest, um, station on Antarctica. It's run by the Americans, but there's people from all over the world there.
Oh, wow.
And, it's a very industrial kind of looking place.
Mm,
It's got, uh, dorms and, a big main building that has, like, a store and a post office and a place to eat,
mm.
and there are carpenters and plumbers and, all kinds of people there,
Wow.
that, all in support of the science
Mm.
that's being done. And that town is on an island with a live volcano behind the town
Oh,
that's
wow.
shooting some smoke up once in a while. And then across the water is the mainland of Antarctica, and there are mountains,
Wow.
um, very, very tall mountains all along that shoreline. So it's really pretty.
And there's plant life and everything?
No, there's
Oh.
not really any plants. There are skua birds that are like
Mm,
gulls, and there are penguins and seals
wow.
and whales, and yeah,
So
that's
that's
pretty.
the so all they do is just eat each other kind of thing? Is that
Yeah, kind of, I guess so.
Wow. So that's the whole ecosystem of Antarctica. That's
Yeah,
amazing. No,
yeah,
thank you for sharing. That's amazing. Yeah, for some reason it interests. I would like to go visit just to see it, I guess.
yeah, that's pretty neat. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess leading up to the well, not just the NDE, I guess let me ask you this. Any place that you've done archaeology, did you ever connect with because as a psychic, do you see the spirits as well? Is that one of your gifts, or it's more
I
just
have.
okay? Oh, wow.
Yeah, I have. Um, the one time when the only time that I'll really talk about isn't about seeing the spirits, but it was the end of a long day, and I was doing surface surveys, which means that anytime a ground disturbing activity takes place on public land,
Mm.
federal or state land, an archaeologist has to go out and look at that,
Oh,
the
wow.
surface of the land, and make sure that there aren't any archaeology sites. So
Mm.
I was doing that. I was walking transects out in Wyoming. And it was the end of the day. I was really tired. I'd been out walking for about 8 hours, and I wasn't really paying attention to what I was doing. I was kind of daydreaming and walking along over these little sand dunes.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, I realized that I had just seen some fire-cracked rock.
Oh, wow.
And so I turned around and I walked back, and there was no fire-cracked rock there. And I without even thinking, I just dropped down to my knees and started digging. And about 6 inches or 8 inches down into the sand, I found those fire-cracked rock in exactly the formation that I had seen them in.
Wow.
So that was yeah, that was pretty neat.
So what did this fire crack rock belong to, or what? What did it
There
belong?
was a small prehistoric site there. So there was a few more on the other side of the dune. There was a few more um, concentrations of fire-cracked rock, and there were some flakes
Mm.
of worked stone in that area too.
So did it have to do with the native people that lived there before? Is that's what?
Indigenous people,
Wow.
yeah, there was not we didn't date the site, so I don't know how old it was, but yeah, it was from indigenous.
Wow. And I mean, you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but have you ever ran into conflict because of places that you guys were looking at, and then there was conflict because people didn't want you like in those areas, or?
No, not really. No, most of that, well, I would say I did run into a couple conflicts, but they were conflicts with ranchers who
Oh.
were running their cattle out there. They didn't like the Bureau of Land Management, who I was working for. And so I've had guns pulled on me out
Oh,
there
wow.
because they didn't really want me looking around.
But did you have permission to be there, or?
It's public land.
Oh, okay. And they
Yeah.
just.
They yeah, that's a long and messy issue. A lot of ranchers out there really resent the federal government and think that because they're running their cattle out there, they should be able to keep everybody off of it. And that's a very simplistic way of I'm going to get emails about that. It's a very simplistic way to talk about it. Yeah, it's a complex, messy kind of subject, but
No, I can imagine. So you were working as an archaeologist on behalf of the federal government then?
at that time I was,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
I've worked for contractors and for the federal government, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. So like you said, since it's messy, we'll leave that there. And you know what? I failed to even mention for anybody watching that doesn't know what an NDE is. That's a near-death experience. Um, and most people that share their stories about NDEs, it's like you basically die, or as I guess us humans understand it, right? Or here, like we die and then you come back to life, right? So that's the NDE. So I guess we'll lead up to that now. So you agreed to go to Iraq. You traveled. So you were there doing the same thing you were doing here, right? As arch. Oh no.
No, I didn't go as an archaeologist. I went as a construction representative.
Oh wow.
So I worked for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, who they were doing a lot of the rebuilding of Iraq. So they're building roads, medical facilities, police stations, water treatment plants,
Oh wow.
sewage systems, all kinds of things.
Mm.
And so I was in charge of kind of managing some of those construction projects.
Oh wow. And so, how long were you there for before everything happened?
I went over there in August 2006.
Mm.
So I was over there about 16 months, I think. I was injured the end of November in 2007.
Oh wow. So you were at that point you were pretty comfortable, but it wasn't that, right? You already had your protocols as to every time you went out. So basically you were going from site to site, manage
Mhm.
or supervise or managing the construction of different.
A lot of the construction projects that I had, well, all of them were directly managed by one of 4 Iraqi engineers who worked for me. So they were out at the sites every single day. I would go out maybe once a week
Mhm.
and go visit these sites and make sure everything was going all right, and make sure that the Iraqi contractors kind of knew that we were paying attention
Oh,
and,
okay.
and wanted good quality
Yeah.
work. And then about after I don't know how many months, after a while, all of my projects were given to someone else, and I was given one road project,
Oh
and
wow.
I was in charge of that one road project exclusively, and I did go outside the wire every day for
Okay.
months on that project. And then I moved to another base near Nasiriyah called
Mm.
Talil. And I was then, I guess, a program manager or project manager. So I did a little bit different work. I was working on the funding of projects and overseeing them kind of at the next level up from a construction rep. And that's what I was doing. That was the job that I was doing when our vehicle was hit. I was out with 3 other colleagues, and we were visiting some water treatment plant sites and a road site. Yeah, it was the end of the day, and long hot day. So I was kind of half asleep in the truck when an IED, an improvised explosive device, went off under the vehicle.
Oh, wow. So it was right as you were driving over it, it went off?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they concluded that it was probably set off by a cell phone.
Oh, wow. And how many vehicles were in the convoy as you guys?
We had 4 vehicles. When we would travel off base, we always had at least 3 vehicles. But this time, because there were 4 of us, 4 of my colleagues, they can only fit 2 of us in each vehicle. So there's a lead truck that has a driver and a gunman. And then what they call the principal vehicle, where I would be in, and then a gun truck. And this time we had 2 principal vehicles. So in our truck, there was a driver and a guard and two of us. And then there was another vehicle like that, a driver, a guard, and 2 more of my colleagues. And then the gun truck had, I think it had 2, but maybe it had, no, I think it must have had 3 guys in it.
Wow.
So we had a 4 vehicle convoy. It was typical way that we traveled off base. We couldn't go off base without an armed convoy.
And so as you were passing, or did anyone end up, I mean, aside from your experience, did anyone else pass away from the IED explosion, or?
Yeah, the guard sitting in front of me was killed.
Oh, wow.
And the other 3 of us were, all pretty severely injured.
Oh. Did any of your other colleagues have, or anyone else that was in the vehicle? Because only your vehicle took the hit, right? The other. Wow. So did anyone else experience also NDE or anything?
Nope.
Wow.
Nope.
So during this experience, so you were hit, and did you instantly know, like, did you have an out-of-body experience and then you saw everything happening, or how did it go from that point?
Yeah, I was kind of half asleep with my head on my hand with my eyes closed. And then I didn't hear the explosion. I was just out of my body.
Wow.
And I found myself standing, like standing on a stage kind of, and there were thousands of beings all around me, like in a stadium. And I was downloading information to them. And then I communicated that I wasn't going to go back into my body. I wasn't interested. And they were like, okay, good, fine. And then said, well, but what if you went back and did this thing? And I was like, oh, okay, I'll do that. Yeah, I'll go back. So that's how easily my mind has changed. And then I call my movements during this experience blinking, because I would be in one place and then in another place. There was no in between there. So after kind of interacting with these thousands of beings, I blinked to another place that I called the deep rest environment, where I did a kind of a life review and just went into this really, really deep rest. And when I was done with that, went back to that big group again for a few minutes, and then went to a place that I call the healing environment. I was kind of hovering at a 45-degree angle above the truck. I could see the truck down on the desert, and I could see each of us in the truck. And I could perceive that like like organizations of energy. And I was with a couple other beings, and we were playing around with my injuries. We were setting different injuries in my body. When we were done kind of playing around with that, and I chose the injuries that I wanted. We set them in the body, and then I blinked again, and I was down standing next to the truck. And it was kind of like it was like I was in between time space, like nothing was moving. It didn't feel like time was moving. It felt like everything had stopped, and I was standing there with about 8 helpers or colleagues or guardians or whatever we want to call them. And we were all discussing what I had agreed to do, kind of from the viewpoint of, when I was talking to all those beings, communicating with all those thousands of beings, it was like discussing what I was going to do from the perspective of management. And then when I was standing next to the truck and talking to these 8 other beings, it was like, okay, now we're on the ground and things look different from here. So let's talk about these things now. And then when we were done, I just blinked, and I heard a big pop, and I was back in my body.
Oh, wow.
And I knew that I had been somewhere else, but I also knew that it was a pretty serious explosion, and that I would have to open my eyes and kind of deal with that. So I really didn't think about where I had just been. It was a few months before I finally went, you know what? I went somewhere. Where did I go? And as soon as I closed my eyes, just the memory came back so vividly and so completely. I couldn't figure out how I had forgotten, because it was so complete and so detailed. And that's when I started writing the book about it.
Oh, wow. So as you were writing the book, it all started coming back to you?
It started coming back to me, and then I started writing the book.
Oh, okay. How long was it after it happened that everything started coming back?
Probably about 3 or 4 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, when you were in this kind of stadium type room, so the truck and everything weren't there, right? You were like in a whole nother place when that happened. And then after everything that had happened, then they took you back there, and that's when, or you just appeared back there. It's funny when
Yeah,
you say that.
I think I was in control of myself. No one was moving me around.
Okay.
No one was telling me where to go. I was always in charge of myself. That's what it felt like. Like, okay. I could go wherever I wanted to go, or not go wherever I wanted to go.
Oh,
If
wow.
I had, if they had said, well, why don't you go back and do this? And I had said no, they would have, it looks to me like they would have just said, okay, that's fine. Like it was up to me. It wasn't anyone ordering me around.
Wow. And it's interesting that you talked about the stadium, because just my last guess, I don't think they said they had an NDE, but they had that experience, and they mentioned the stadium seating.
I've had lots of other people come to me and say, I recognize that. I've been there. I don't know if it's the same group, but I know that place.
Wow.
I think that's neat.
See, but their experience, it was interesting, because they said they were even in this meeting, and it was all these other beings that looked like, not a human, right? That she was the only human there. And then one of them turned and said, not the human. And then boom, she appeared back in her body. She was sitting up in her bed. And I'm like, wow, that's interesting. And she doesn't know why. I was curious to know why. Did you experience anything like, did you see beings from other that didn't look human? Like they look different, or did everyone look?
Well, the way I describe that is in my memory, they look human. But I think that that's an overlay. I think that makes sense to my human mind. And I think I talk about this in more detail in the book, but there are parts of my experience that I can go back into this experience and be there. And when I'm there, if if there's things that I can change that are kind of malleable with my imagination, then it kind of tells me that I'm maybe not seeing exactly what was there, that my human mind is making it comprehensible. So I can go back and change those beings into monsters or into little beams of light, or I can change them. They're kind of fluid, which suggests to me that I'm the one making them look human, because there's other parts of my experience I can't, no matter what, I can't change that image in my mind. It is what it is, and I can't use my imagination to change it. So that suggests to me that some things I'm seeing as they were, and some things I'm seeing perhaps accurately, but not truly, or something.
And yourself, you saw yourself as human too, or were you seeing yourself, or were you looking through your eyes, like everything, you couldn't really see your own body?
I was aware when I was in front of all those thousands of beings, I was aware that I was in a human form, and I had my uniform on.
Oh, wow.
It's all ripped up from being blown up.
Wow.
I was very aware of that. I'm like, oh, well, this is interesting. This makes me look pretty adventurous. But then when I went to, for instance, the deep rest environment, I really perceived myself as an organization of energy that didn't have a form necessarily.
Wow.
And I think, I mean, that felt kind of more true or more real.
And I had heard in an interview that when you mentioned about choosing your injuries, how you actually got to see what life would be like, for example, if you had a missing arm, and how you were all laughing about it or something.
Yeah, we thought it was hilarious. Me and the two that I was with, the one especially felt like an old friend. And we were the ones kind of goofing around, and we'd kind of do the equivalent of waving a hand, and my right arm would be severed. Wow. And then we would see, like, just in a flash, like a holographic image or something, we'd see my whole life with that injury.
Wow.
And we thought that was hilarious. We would give me shrapnel in my brain so that I had some kind of brain damage, and we'd fall down laughing. We thought it was very funny. It's a very, very different perspective, because from that perspective, it's known that this lifetime is not very long, and it's not that serious. You know, we put everything in the context of one lifetime: birth, growth, maturity, aging, death, and everything has to make sense within that time frame. And so everything looks big because the time frame is relatively short. But if you imagine multiple lifetimes, or if you imagine infinity, and putting this lifetime into that context, it's only 40 years. It's only 60 years. It's only 80 years. It's not very long. So that's the perspective that we were working from. And I think it's important to explain that, because I know what it's like to live with chronic pain, and even a day can feel interminable. It can feel just like hell. And I don't want to make it sound like that's not real, because we're in the experience. It is real, but there are other perspectives. And from the perspective that we were working from, we weren't in pain. You know, we weren't in the pain. So it was easier to laugh about it. It was easier to see it from a different perspective.
Definitely. And even you saying that, it makes me think of, like, see, video games. You could play video games, and you do dumb things and you laugh at, you know, the character getting hit by a car or doing weird stuff, and you're like, aha, look it. And so it's funny. It's almost like, did we as humans create that to make sense subconsciously? Like whoever creates these things, maybe we're trying to just understand. I mean, that's me overthinking things, but is it like maybe subconsciously? Even movies, right? Movies, like it's funny in acting, right? You're not supposed to break, I believe it's the fourth wall, and that's when you look at the camera, you know, because then it's like, hey, they could see me or something, you know. So everything's more
It's very
shot.
much like those things, I
Yeah.
think.
So it's shot more through the perspective of like we're just observing, but then once they look back at you, it freaks you out. Like, oh,
Yeah.
man. So it's so now with your understanding of that. So did you see a lot of these different injuries, or just like a few that you remember, like the arm, the without an
The ones I
arm?
remember are like a hole in my head,
Wow.
severing my arm, a big hole in my side. Those are the ones that I remember. And then, haha. When we were done laughing, I'm like, okay, we gotta come on, choose what you want, do it.
And so the ones you decided on, what were the main injuries, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, I had a broken heel from shrapnel.
Oh, wow.
Both these bones in my arm were shattered, and some of the wrist bones were broken. All the bones on the right side of my face were broken.
Oh, wow.
And my skull was fractured, and I had some holes in my skull right here. And I had shrapnel. I think I had shrapnel in both eyes, but definitely in the right eye. And that retina eventually came detached. So, and because of the holes here, the muscles in this eye also don't really line up. So the eyes don't see together, and this eye has almost no vision. A little bit. They reattached the retina, but there's no lens in that eye, and there was some damage to the optic nerve too. So
Wow.
those are the main things. Lots of shrapnel also.
And so, to your understanding, you agreed to this then?
Yeah, I agree to it. Now you go. Now I think, yeah, well, I could have just broken an arm or something, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that, yeah. So, because see, I understand that now because of an experience I had, but like, so did you ever have moments when you were like, why would I even choose to do this? Like, this is crazy.
I had a couple moments like that when I was in the hospital. I was like, God, I really want to be able to see out of both eyes. I'm an artist. I don't, I need both my eyes. And I was getting kind of upset. And all of a sudden, I just had this really clear thought that said, oh, don't worry about it. It's only 40 more years. And I felt that. I felt
Oh,
like,
wow.
big deal. It's only 40 years. So even though at that time I didn't remember the NDE, I had moments like that over and over that I think were clearly the result of having that NDE. Because that's not the way I would normally have thought. I wouldn't have gone, oh, it's only 40 more years. I would have gone, no, poor me.
Yeah. So I don't want to jump too far ahead, but let's say now with that understanding, since we're on the subject, how do you feel about like the whole human experience? Are we here to learn and that's it? It's just like a school, or are we meant to? Because see, let's say for example, in the past it would have been books, right? There was no internet. We couldn't all get the information at the snap of a finger. So now everyone's able to share these stories and make more people aware of, hey, we're only here for a limited time. Anyone that, so if this video were to go around the world, and I've seen some of your other interviews, how many people have seen them? So people would get that understanding. Well, okay, this is some kind of so how would you think? It's more of a school? It's really not real, any of it? It's all just a simulation? Or are we really gonna turn into that? Like whoever is you were on the other side, that's what we eventually become. And this is like, there's so many variables. So what did you get from, what's your input?
Well, I think the way that I'm sort of shown the world itself is that if you imagine that everything that we think, everything that we imagine becomes real in some way. It forms. But it doesn't mean that that holds its form. So say somebody imagined a world and imagined it in detail. And so it kind of became something that anybody could perceive. But then I turned my attention away from it and I ignored it. And there's no attention on it. There's nothing to hold it together. So it begins to fall apart. But what if I created that and then got a bunch of friends together and said, look at this. And more people were attracted to it and went, oh, look at that. And pretty soon people said, hey, wait a minute, we could go into that and have an experience through that. Then what would that be like? And so this thing that we have created becomes more and more, quote unquote, solid. It becomes more and more stable. And so people can beings can come into form and experience through it. That's kind of how I'm shown this reality. Is it a simulation? Well, in a way, but I mean, we're here, we're in it, it's real. It doesn't, in some ways, it doesn't matter whether it's real or not real. If our experience within it is real, then it's real in that way. It has effect. So that's my take on that. I think that what I'm shown as far as what we're doing here is, instead of using the word learn, because in our culture that assumes tests and hierarchies of, first grade, second grade, third grade, or whatever. And I think it's more fluid than that. I like the word exploration. So I think that it's possible that humanity or a group of people beings said, what happens if we believe that we're separate from everything? What if we believe that we're separate from the source? What kind of experience would we have? And I think that we said, oh, well, let's find out. And so we entered into this world of form that with sort of a blanking of our memory of who and what we really are. And I think that at this point, we've kind of taken that experiment as far as it can go without destroying ourselves. And I think that we're kind of all willing to walk ourselves home now, to remember who and what we are. Like, okay, we've done that. We've done that exploration. We've learned a lot of things. Now can we walk ourselves back out of that exploration? Can we walk ourselves back into the fact that we have always been connected, that we've always been part of each other, that we're all one? That's my take on it.
No, thank you. Yeah, that's interesting because like I was shown when, I'm not sure if I had it, because even things that you were saying kind of I remembered, because when I was around 17, I have a huge scar that it was, it faded away over time, but I don't know if you could really see, but it faded away over time. Let me see. I don't know if you could see it. It's like,
oh yeah, I can't see it. Yeah. Ooh,
but it
wow.
It used to go all the way. I was in a car accident. I guess my friend's sister was picking us up from school, and we saw her at the light. Back then, there were payphones, so we were calling her, and then we see her car, so we're like, oh, we hang up and we run and we get in the car. She was waiting at the one of those lights, right? And when it turned yellow, she thought this big old truck was gonna stop, so she goes, but it sped up and it hit. I guess it must have hit on the side I was on, right? And then I guess I got knocked out, And then I heard my friend's voice after, and I hadn't opened my eyes yet. I was kicking my legs, and he's like, "Hey, like calm down, calm down." And I guess he put a shirt because I was bleeding. And so, all that stuff happened. And then I was at the hospital, and then it was funny because I remember even thinking at the hospital because they just wrapped me up with all the glass. And so for like 3 days, I could barely turn, and it was slicing my head up, all the glass. And so I remember thinking, like, even that, like, oh, this must be what Jesus felt like with his cross.
Oh,
Like, I don't ever have to wonder, oh, like, because people love to depict that, like, movies
yeah.
and everything. And I was like, man, I don't even have to wonder that because it was so painful just having, all this glass for like 3 days. So all these experiences, right? But from that point on is when I really opened up spiritually. But when I really got the understanding was my brother passed away in 2019, right? And he took his life. He was in the military. He had gotten blown up at one point too, and hit with an IED in Iraq. He had deployed 3 times, right? And I think they floored it. He was in the front, and I guess something told them to floor it. Maybe instinct, and even the Humvee behind them, that one got hit harder, and someone that was under his command, passed away and all that. So I remember all that stuff, but basically after, right, he ended up taking his life like in 2019, right? And it hit me so hard that then these like beings, but first they looked like human. They showed me like everything was already kind of like agreed upon. And I couldn't even tell my family, because how do I tell my family like, oh,
It's
they
okay.
showed me. Yeah,
Yeah.
we agreed to this.
Yeah.
And even that, I still had a hard time with it. And then even they appeared to me again, but then they were like these beings, right? Then they were their true form, and they were these huge beings, and the same. I wanted to go with them. It's like, I think on the third time they appeared to me, they were like, "You want to go?" And I was like, "Yeah." And it was almost like they didn't expect me to give that answer. And when I woke up, I was like, "Ah, shoot!" Almost like I said, "Okay, fine, I'll stay a little longer."
Yeah.
And that was like in the middle of the pandemic, when things were just really, I was just over it. I was like, you know what? Like, I'm just tired of it.
Yeah.
I was still grieving for my brother, all this other stuff going around. And then they appeared. It was like in this thing, it was like a spaceship came down, and then they were like, do you want to go? And like you said, it's all telepathic. It's like all the information. Yeah, it's all. And then I was like, yeah, I just want to go. Like, and then I was like, oh, that's not the answer they wanted to hear, right? But I got way ahead of myself. But just to say, like, so to me, that's what they showed me, that it's already like it's some kind of like we agreed to it.
Oh,
And
okay. Yeah, I think we do agree to it. I don't think that we necessarily agree to every little thing that happens to us,
yeah,
because I think we have some free will working with our higher self, making choices while we're here, but we do agree to come into this world as it is. And I think we do agree to the general circumstances, our families, or what country we're coming into, or, those kinds of things. And as soon as we agree to that, we're on a path. We may have, it may be a pretty broad path, and we have a lot of choices within it, but we're still on that path. But I think it does certainly change the way I think about things, knowing now that I made these choices. That's not just random, and nobody's imposing this upon me. For some reason, I chose this. I had a friend who read my book, and she really couldn't wrap her head around the fact that I would choose to be injured and choose to have pretty serious injuries. And she said she thought about it for days, and finally she realized that she had gone through childbirth, which is really painful and can be very uncomfortable. And yet, now that she's got her kids, she never thinks about that. She thinks she loves the kid. She loves her life with the kid. She doesn't think, oh, that wasn't worth it, She thinks, yeah, well, that was worth it. That's something you have to go through to get here, then fine. That's all right. And that made sense to me, you know, it maybe I didn't choose to be injured because of the injuries, but I chose to be injured because of where it would take me afterward.
No, that makes sense. Thank you. I also heard in an interview where you said you thought maybe you did get signs before that happened. So do you feel that I mean, now in hindsight, maybe you feel that it was just part of your, your script basically that way, you kind of agreed to, but you did say that maybe it could have been prevented. So how do you, or what kind of signs were you getting leading up to that point or?
I was interesting that we mentioned tarot cards earlier because
Mm,
for about 5 days in a row, I would just draw one tarot card a day
okay.
when I was there. And for about 5 days in a row, I got the Tower. And I was
Oh,
like, oh man, what
yeah.
does that mean?
Yeah.
And uh, just about 2 weeks before, some friends of mine had gotten blown up, and
Oh,
a week before, some friends of mine gotten blown up. And I was like, you know, things are getting dicier. Maybe I shouldn't go outside the wire, and maybe I should start saying, don't make me do that, instead of just going, okay, I'll go outside the wire. Because I always wanted to
mm,
get outside of base. It felt
yeah.
like prison, you know. Um, and um, and then I did have a dream that was it was it was more symbolic. It wouldn't make any sense if I went through it, but to me the symbols were like, maybe I should watch out or something.
Mm,
um so there were definitely a few signs that probably if I had been a little more on top of things, that maybe I would have been a little more careful. But I also think that if I hadn't gotten blown up, I would have given myself something else,
mm,
probably an equivalent in some way. And I do what I was shown when I was in that kind of stadium environment was that my getting blown up had a much bigger effect than I thought it did. That there were these sort of waves of information that went out from that incident that had to do with the um, pointlessness of violence.
mm,
I was like, oh, well, that's pretty cool.
yeah.
Nothing that I did. It just is a side effect. You know, we live in this world is kind of set up on cause and effect. And so when you put something into motion, you know, we tend to see only effects that you can physically see or that make some kind of emotional or mental sense to us.
Mm.
But I think that the effects are much more profound than we really imagine for lots and lots of things, not just getting blown up.
No, most definitely. So did you ever think it would, because you've been interviewed by tons of people and you wrote a book, The Application of Impossible
Impossible
Things.
things.
Okay. And has you like your so I mean mostly I think you get interviewed on the NDE experience, right? As opposed to the book, but all everything you've learned from that experience is in the book, correct?
Yeah, the book really walks people through that experience of being out of the body in a really detailed way.
Mm,
I try to be um, I try to be careful about how I describe it. So I
mm,
was trying to be as accurate as I could possibly be. I think I had read a couple of NDE books, I think in my 30s, and they spent a lot of time talking about their injury or their physical death, and then only a few pages talking about being out of the body, and then
mm,
a lot of time talking about their rehab or whatever they did. And I thought, well, that's not what I want to know about.
mm.
I want to know that little part in there where you were out of your body. That's what I want to know.
Ah,
And so when I wrote my book, I was like, well, okay, I guess now I get the chance to do that. So there's almost nothing about leading up to the NDE
okay.
and almost nothing in the aftermath in that book. The book is really about me being out of my body and what I experienced.
Wow. No, I am gonna order it and read it because I found
I'll have them send you a comp copy.
oh, thank you. No, because even my whole experience when my brother passed away, it was just the 4-year anniversary this in February, right? This month.
Mm.
And everything that I've been shown, it's been like a whole like cookie crumbs, and just it's too much to try to explain talking. So I wanted to go into detail in I wrote a book recently. It wasn't a long book, it's only about 50 pages, right?
Mhm.
But I mean, it goes into as much detail as I could. And I wish I could put pictures. I haven't learned yet how to put, because they showed me physical proof. That's what I guess I found amazing, that I can show people, look, this is impossible. Like the odds of this happening is like, to me, it would be like winning the lottery. But I was shown nonstop like these signs, right? Since his
That's so
passing.
neat.
Yeah. I don't know. Did you get anything? Well, I mean, I heard you in an interview. I think you have my kind of attitude where if people don't believe you, you really don't
I don't
care.
care. Yeah. It's fine. I understand why people wouldn't believe me.
Yeah.
That's fine.
100%. No, and that's, I think, one of the reasons I started the podcast was because I wanted to find people like me, right? And that way, as I'm interviewing you, it's like if people think you're crazy, then I'm crazy too. So it's fine. We'll be
We'll be
crazy
crazy together.
100%. No, and there's actually a story that I never told anyone. I believe I never told anyone because I don't think they would have understood. But since you mentioned all that, like I was in the military as well. And my unit wasn't going to Iraq, but it's funny because it was around 2007, around there or something, I believe. And so, I have like the premonitions, and they're very accurate. Even I just, like 2 interviews ago, I interviewed a friend that's a medium that helped me when my brother passed away, because her gift is more like on the spot. And so I guess she was communicating with me things that he was saying and this and that. And in that interview, we mentioned all these things, and they already all came true. Both of us were like, I wonder what this.
Oh,
Oh, I had a dream about. Yeah. So since she even mentioned nachos, and I was like, nah, she's all watch. Just remember nachos, okay? And then so down the anniversary of my brother's passing, I went with my parents to the cemetery, and after we were there for a good while, when we left, I guess we were hungry. And I left it up to my mom. Like, she told me, what do you want to eat? I was like, nah, no, you decide. Whatever you want to eat. And she's like, I feel like nachos. I was like, I was like, no way. And she had said that 3 days prior.
That's
3 days,
great.
yeah. 3 days prior, she had mentioned, just remember nachos. I was like, I don't know what that means. And then all these things, right, came true from that interview already. And so, when I was in the military, like I had a dream, and it was basically like death was smiling at me, waiting for me in the desert. I was like, okay, it reminded me of like this movie. I think in Gladiator, they say, oh, sometimes death smiles at us. All we could do is smile back or something like that.
Mhm.
So I was like, oh, wow. And 2 days later, my brother, he called me and he was like, hey, they're taking volunteers to go to Iraq. And instantly the dream popped in my head. I was like, oh, death is waiting for me in the desert. I was like, okay, give me the number, because my unit wasn't going to Iraq anytime soon. And so I called. They're like, oh yeah, just talk to your XO. I talked to my XO, my commanding officer. He said he approved me everything. So it was crazy because I don't know if it was like I don't think it was like a death wish. I hope that's not what it was. I don't know what younger me was thinking,
Mhm.
because you feel an obligation to go, your brothers and sisters, at that point, you become a family. They're going to Iraq. Why am I not going to go?
Right.
If my
Yeah.
unit's not going to go, I'm going to go too.
Mhm.
But with me, it was just crazy because at that point, I already was aware of my premonitions and how accurate they were. And I
Mhm.
still almost like, okay, like, fine. I'm gonna go to you.
I'll meet you.
Yeah. But then I got in trouble, and they didn't let me go to Iraq.
Oh.
Yeah. It's like this gunnery sergeant. He's like, I don't care what the XO said. You're mine. You're not going nowhere.
Your higher self went, not yet.
Yeah. So how do you feel about things like that? See, like, because I couldn't tell people about the premonitions back then, how accurate they are and this and that. So that's what you feel like the higher self was like, oh, well,
I think so.
oh, go
I
ahead.
mean, I think that you know, we have a lot of power in our choices once we're in the body from the personality self. But I think that we're not creating in a vacuum. We are an aspect of our higher self. And so the higher self is paying attention too. And I think that, you know, we may have a death wish, but if that higher self says, no, I'm not really done yet, then I think that's going to trump what we try to do.
Yeah.
I think if we can bring ourselves into a coherence with that higher self, I mean, that's kind of what you're doing, you know, being willing to listen and willing to pay attention to these premonitions, right? You're communicating with that higher self. You're saying, okay, I'm paying attention. I'm going to work with my higher self, not work against it. And I think that a lot of times that can really open the channels a lot more. We can get a lot more help than we often think we have.
No, most definitely. Thank you. Yeah, so oh man, I was so immersed in what you were saying that my brain just drew a blank. So because I had something else I wanted to say as far as that. Let me see, the premonition, this, that. Man, my whole mind just poof.
Oh.
Let me see. Okay. Oh, I know. You also said that like you were in a way shown it's kind of like there is rules here. There was an interview where you're talking about there is certain rules or something to us being here. I don't know if you remember. I wish I could remember word for word what you said.
I don't remember, but I mean, this reality is kind of, you know, there's, if you want to call them rules, there's rules that kind of hold this reality in the shape that it's in, right? In the same way that on a microcosmic level, we have cultural rules. Most people stop at red lights. We all agree to do that. We could all agree not to do it. There are plenty of countries that agree not to do it. But, you know, every culture agrees to different kinds of norms or mores or whatever. And if we're going to participate in this world, there are kind of laws that, if you want to call them that, rules, laws, there are just organizations or systems that kind of define this reality. We can't necessarily stick our hand through the wall. You know, some things are going to appear solid. There's cause and effect. If we put something in motion, there's going to be an effect from that action or from that thought. And so that's kind of what I was talking about in the rules. Not that there are, you know, you better follow the rules, not that kind of thing, but there's a structure that we all exist within. If we didn't all agree to exist within this structure, then it would be even more chaotic than what we've got now. You know?
No, most definitely. You know, it's interesting though, because once I was speaking to someone, it was interesting how it happened, because it's like they wanted help from me, but then so I agreed to call, and they're like, "Oh, can you talk on the phone?" I was like, "Okay." I guess they would see me post like spiritual things, and I guess they said they were having, I don't know if it was like trouble sleeping or certain things. So I called them, but then it was obvious they were very, very psychic, but you know, they were very you know, into like Christianity, right? So they didn't even like the word. I was like, "Oh, so you're psychic?" And then they were like, "No, I don't." I was like, "Oh, okay, you're tuned in then." You know,
Right.
I just said that you're tuned in, and then it was almost like they went into a trance as I was speaking to them, and then they started saying like scenes from my life, and I was just like, "Oh wow," like scenes that I've never really shared with anyone. So to me, it was like, okay, this person is really tapped in, and I didn't mind. Like it didn't feel. I was just more like, oh, that's what that feels like. Because,
Yeah.
yeah. Because
Yeah.
when I'd have dreams about other people, I'm like, hey, I had a dream about, and they're like, and they don't say nothing, and or sometimes they'll be like, no, it did happen, just like you said or whatever. See, so I was like quiet, like, oh, that's what that feels like, and then, but then they went. It was like, oh, I could see you've been given the keys to many doors, but not every door was meant to be open. And I was like, so that's what
Oh,
sounds.
the warnings.
Yes. So even as I started the podcast and everyone I'm interviewing, I was like, wait a second, am I not even? What if, they strike me down all of a sudden? Like that's it. We're taking you back because you're sharing too much information. So that even that got into my head. But you don't feel that there's anything we're not supposed to share as far as those kind of rules as well?
No, I mean, I think that, well, there are a lot of traditions in other cultures that try to limit the dissemination of information, I think. But I think it's because power corrupts. And I think that if you're just aiming to have the knowledge, or aiming to have the psychic ability or the mediumship ability without also asking for wisdom to carry it, then I think that you can do a lot of harm. I think you have to be aware of how you're carrying that information and how you're sharing it, and do it with integrity and do it with care. You don't want to scare people. You don't want to hurt people. And so I think that it does take some wisdom or some attention to carry it well. I guess that's what I have to say about that. Because I think there are people who don't. I think it's pretty easy to say, yeah, well, I'm psychic, and do you know that somebody in your family has cancer, or something like that. I've heard people say things like this. Like, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't scare people. Don't, be careful how you carry that insight and that knowledge, I think.
So do you think like writing a book or doing a podcast, it's more like, hey, we're putting the information there, and if you're led to it, then that's different than us just going and telling you?
Yeah, I think it's fine to put the information out there. I think it's fine to put almost any information out there, depending on the circumstances. I think that most podcasts and most readings, people are coming to you. People are, yes, led to you, or and you're not trying to scare people, or you're not trying to tell people how great you are and how much you know. And you're trying to share information. You're trying to share curiosity. And I think that there's great value in that. I don't think there's anything wrong with sharing that kind of information. I think it's really great.
Yeah. No, and no, you after you said that, thank you for saying that about everything you said, but especially about the ripple effect, right? I've used that analogy before, but even like you saying it again, kind of clicks about, you really put it into perspective about how far your one experience, that experience of pain, getting blown up, how it just, because I mean, you're like, it's tangible. Like you could see what happened with you, like how many people it has reached now, like millions, right?
Oh, it's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah, from this one. I mean, it started after you wrote the book, or were you already invited to speak about it even before you wrote?
After I wrote the book. Yeah. Everything after I wrote the book.
Yeah. And see, I don't think I began to speak about it. I don't know what part I'm supposed to share, because even after my brother passed away, I got lucky that, I was already immersed in a Native community, right? And a week after my brother, he passed away on a Saturday, the next Saturday there was a sweat ceremony. So I went, I talked to the elder, everything. They helped me, dedicated to my brother, to like, help me with that, I guess not letting go in a way, but not letting go. Obviously, you still have to grieve and all that. But it was, a way for me to say goodbye in that way, since I didn't get to say goodbye because the way it happened, right? And I remember he told me, you know, he pulls me aside and we talk, and he's like, the creator gave you something, don't waste it.
Mhm.
And I was like, I knew instantly what he meant, but it's like, if anyone else would have told me that, I would have probably wanted to punch him in the throat. You know? Like at that point, like, okay, my brother's, you know, suicide, that's the creator giving me something. I knew what he meant, right? And
Yeah.
I'm sure eventually, well, that's, I think his passing is what led me to start the podcast to begin with, because everything just,
Mhm.
you know, the way everything unraveled, right? But even that, but see, I've talked about it more in a spiritual way. I've talked about it more like how I was shown that everything is already kind of pre-written. See, and I haven't really gotten to talk about it, maybe just from a physical point of people that deal with not only people dealing with thoughts of suicide, but people that have a loved one that dies and how they cope with it. So I don't
Mhm.
know what's more valuable. I don't know yet what the ripple effect will be from that.
Yeah, I think you just have to go one step at a time,
Mm,
and you'll end up there without, if you try to figure out how to get there, I think it's going to be hard to get there. But if you just say, well, this is all I know to do right now, I think you'll be led, you know, you'll figure it out.
no, thank you. And I mean, so you were pretty much led in that way, right? You were.
Yeah, I didn't even start out writing the book for anybody else.
Mm,
I was writing stuff down so I would remember it. And so I had it real clear in my mind. And then when it was done, I was like, well, I guess I could see if anybody wants to read this. I didn't really want to put it out there
oh wow.
because I was like, oh yeah, and there's a lot of people who are going to think I'm crazy, and who knows what kind of attention I'm going to get. I don't know. Um, because some people are a little crazy, and but then I thought, oh well, if somebody wants to publish it, I'll just go with the flow. And I never intended to do readings for people, professionally for a living. People started coming to me. I don't even know how they found out about me, but they would call me and say, I hear you do readings, can you do it? I'm like, where are you coming from? I don't even know who you are. So, I mean, I think sometimes what we're supposed to be doing comes to us. I don't think that it always happens that way. I think I'm lucky. I think, I don't know, the first 47 years of my life were not like that. But sometimes you just do what's in front of you and it'll get you where you're supposed to be.
Almost definitely. Thank you. And so now that's what you do professionally, right? The readings?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you mind me asking? I know it doesn't matter in the great scheme of things, but I'm curious as to what sign you are. Just out of my.
I'm Pisces,
Oh, Pisces. Okay.
the last degree of Pisces.
Wow. I don't know about the degrees yet. I'm still learning all that. My mom's a Pisces as well. When's your birthday?
March 20th.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's like
Yeah, when's
almost
hers?
mine.
When's your mom's?
Oh, March 10th.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. So
When's yours? What sign are you?
Gemini.
Oh, okay.
The curiosity, obviously.
Yeah, total curiosity.
Yeah, yeah. So that's why, I ask so many questions. Let me see, because I don't, obviously, I know you have things to do, so I don't want to. Oh, real quick, if you don't mind talking about that, about the judgment. So you said it's really important to not judge. I heard an interview where you said about the judgment, like not to judge. Like you were shown that, or that's just from your own, like you feel that's very important to not be here judging ourselves, judging others.
Yeah, I think it's really destructive. I think using some compassion and forgiveness for ourselves and for other people
Mm,
is much more productive. It's, judging, first of all, judging other people. We don't know what they're going through. We
mm,
don't know where they're coming from. Um, and and I think if we can suspend judgment, then we're more likely to find out where they're coming from and have some um, tolerance and compassion for that.
mm,
And I think it's really, really destructive to judge ourselves. That inner voice of criticism can
mm,
be really destructive. And if we can remember that everything that we've had up till now is in the past,
mm.
and we made those decisions and choices that we made, to the best of our ability with the information that we had available. And if it didn't turn out the way we wanted it to turn out, maybe we can forgive ourselves for that and move forward, you know, instead of saying why, maybe we can say, well, how do I best handle this now?
Well, definitely. No, thank you. Because like the ripple effect, right? Like even though there is a purpose to everything, right? You would you feel that way? Like every single thing has some kind of
I think so. I think that sometimes there's going to be purpose that we don't understand as humans that won't really make sense to us in our small context. But I do think that everything matters. I think certainly everything can be made purposeful or meaningful when we bring our own attention to it and our capacity for love to it.
Thank you. So, yeah, I don't know what, I'm sure I could think of more questions to ask you. I don't know, I'm sure you have other things to do, but thank you. Oh, real quick. So what made you come up with the title, The Application of Impossible Things? What?
It just came as I was writing the book. I don't even know. I guess maybe I already had the book written in my higher self or something. I don't know. I when it came to me, I was like, oh, I like that a lot because I think that people assume that the non-physical is not applicable. You know, that we can't move mountains and we can't talk to spirits and we can't, you know, all these things that are supposedly impossible. We can't put our hand through a wall or whatever. But I think that when we really, truly, thoroughly understand who and what we really are, I think we transcend some of those rules and some of those limitations that we've created for ourselves. So I think that those quote unquote impossible things are possible to apply in our everyday life, because this, like I said, this world is part of the non-physical. It's not separate from it. It's a subset of it. So it's all of this is holy. All of us, everything that exists exists as the creator in motion.
Wow. That's beautiful. No, and it's just the thought I had right now was that, like your story, right? Like you were an archaeologist and then you had this experience, even though you already had all these spiritual gifts in general, right? So I think when you speak, you seem so well grounded, right? Like, so people won't look at it like, oh, she's these fanciful stories, or it was just the trauma to her head or some crazy thing. It's like you are someone that someone would see. It's almost like it's perfect. It was perfect that you would bring this knowledge because of your background. You're someone that was professional and that it seems like a stable kind of career. And then this happened, and then I think there was even NDEs that happened to like doctors, for example. So
yeah,
what are you gonna say? Oh, that archaeologist is crazy. That doctor is crazy. So
yeah, I've had a really clear experience a few months after I wrote the book. Evan Alexander is the doctor who had a near-death experience, and there was somebody else. I was thinking about those people, and all of a sudden I just knew that we all had the experiences that made sense for our lives so that we could take those out to a certain audience. It's like each of these people, including me, could reach a certain audience in a certain way because of who we are, what we look like, what our background is, what our jobs had been, it was really interesting to me. It's like, oh yeah, it's making sense, it's not just random.
Yeah. I guess that's the thought I had right now from the beginning of the interview.
Yeah.
So now it's like, okay, it all makes sense. Like I get it.
And what you're doing makes sense for you.
I guess. I'm sure it does at some point.
You got your audience.
Yeah. I'm sure. It's I definitely have a different kind of audience. Most definitely. Because I think most people wouldn't see someone like me doing these kind of interviews, I think, as well. See, that's one of the things, you know, I lost a lot of the people I used to associate with because maybe it got a little weird for them, I would think. Like, you know, I switched so quickly, but it was already always in there. It's just you don't speak about it. That's it.
Right.
And I think after, like, that was the tower moment. The tower moment was like my brother's passing, where I just didn't care. At that point, it's like, I don't even care what anyone thinks. I think that, you know, even though we say it a lot, like, I don't care what anyone thinks, but in a way, you know, we do
We
still.
do, yeah. Until we hit that point where, the only thing that matters is being true to ourselves.
Exactly. And so I could keep going on and on. So Natalie Sudman, thank you so much. It was an honor. The application of Impossible Things, right? It's available everywhere, right?
Yeah, Amazon and I don't know where all. Barnes and Noble.
And do you have a website as well where people can contact you if they want readings and all that, or?
Yeah, on the traceofelements.com, on the readings page is all the information about readings. And you can look at my artwork and stuff on nsudman.com.
Okay.
And thanks a lot for having me, Omar. It's been really fun.
No, thank you. I'm honored. And you know, you're giving me a lot, you know, a different perspective on certain things. So I'm always happy when I learn something, right? Which I do. I think every single guest, there's been a key thing that I was like, okay.
Oh, that's great.
That makes sense. Yeah. And no, I'll put all the links, you know, in the description to your websites and everything. And so, yeah, maybe one day, you know, you could come back again. I know you're really busy. You know, like I said, though, I felt bad just because after I've just seen how many of these interviews you've done. So I was like, oh, man.
That's all right. Everyone is different.
Yeah.
So, it's fine.
Yeah. Thank you.
I joke because I kind of, I joked that I wrote the book so I didn't have to tell the story over and over. And then because I wrote the book, I have to tell the story over and over.
Wow.
That's okay. That's all right. It's fun meeting people like you. I had a good time, Omar. Thank you.
Thank you. Likewise. Thank you so much. Okay, so on that note, thanks again, and it was an honor.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, sometimes you're just feeling it, you know what I'm saying? You're just feeling it. And I want to feel this way forever.